So, good morning, everybody. My name is Wuhan Yang, and today's presentation, my topic is basics of copy editing. So, when we talk about copy editing, I think first thing first, we need to understand its concept. So, the concept is quite long, and I have already stressed the keywords under the concept. So, basically, the copy editing is the process of reviewing and correcting. I think reviewing and correcting are the key. And what aims to the copy editing is to improve accuracy, readability, and fitness to ensure it is free of error, omission, inconsistency, and repetition. So, in the context of publication in print, copy editing for the sequence is done before typesetting and also before the proofreading. Actually, it's the final step of editorial circle. It is the final step. When we talk about copy editing, we cannot just put it separately with copy editors because all the works are done by a certain group of people. So in this section, I'd like to let you guys know about the copy editor. So basically, there are two main positions of the copy editors: the copy text chef, and copy editors. So it is very obvious that copy text chief are the kind of the senior person in kind of the higher position. And there are some tasks and principles of copy editing according to the crash course. And also one book I also refer to is The Art of Editing. There are so many tasks and principles listed, but I just list I think 6 of them. I think they are important to share with you guys. So the first thing is to read the copy objectively and distantly as possible. Why we need to stay objectively? Because in my opinion, copy editors need to put themselves in a third-party position to ensure their objectivity. It's the way to make their work better. And they need to be very sensitive towards towards the words and also the sentences. In that case, they can find the awkward, confusing, uninformative sentence very quickly. And they should look for unanswered questions. For example, some informational gaps and contradictions to make sure the paragraphs of the news stories flows with each other. So in that case, they should check for the transitions to make sure every transition is smooth. But always, their aims should be brief and simple. It's like what we call to keep it short and simple. So strive for briefly and simplicity. And the last point that I want to emphasize is to make sure you are constant. For example, sometimes some format they need to be the same all around the news story, no matter it's in the beginning or the end. I give 3 examples. First is the date. The spelling and the using of date should be the same. For example, if you mention about May the 5th, and you cannot mention 5th May at later of the story. And also the capitalization is very important. Sometimes you should make sure what should be capitalized before the editing, and also the abbreviation. What should be used in short tense, and what should be spelling its full name. It should all be consistent. And then we go into a review. I think we have already learned it in the past classes, in the crash course. These are the editing marks These editing marks are useful for us to do the written copy editing. For example, sometimes we need to put no paragraphs, and sometimes we need to put a new paragraph between the two existing paragraphs. Also, sometimes we need to use uppercase, and sometimes we need to use lowercase. Sometimes we need to remove the space. Sometimes we need more space. So this editing marks listed, we need to master, and we need some practice to master it. And now, I'd like to talk about some characteristics of the copy editor. Because copy editor, in my opinion, is never an easy work. It needs some passion. For example, the copy editors need to have the detailed knowledge of grammar, spelling, style, punctuation using, and tightening. In that case, they need to have the passion towards their work. Otherwise, it will feel boring and exhausted very soon. And as I mentioned before, they need to be very sensitive towards the sentences to find out, to detect if there are any wrongs in their sentences. In that case, they need to have very good writing ability. And the third thing I need to emphasize is the legal and ethical awarenesses. Because sometimes the original article, the original news story may have some legal issues. If the copy editors can find it in advance, sometimes it can help the author get rid of this kind of legal and ethical troubles in advance. In that case, it will be very convenient for the authors and both the editors. And the professional knowledge, I think I don't need to emphasize too much on that, because copy editor is totally a professional work for the professional person to do. The last thing I want to emphasize is the self-confidence, because as copy editors, they need to have faith in themselves, and they cannot easily be judged by others or switch their opinions. They need to be very self-determined. And I'd like to talk about the value of copy editors, especially in the human resource market, because work as a copy editor provides the chance to continue an education and incentive to climb the top of the company's hierarchy. And I'd like to tell you guys the good news is that the recent statistics shows that the salary of the copy editors keep increasing in recent years. So they are encouraging signs that show that copy editor is improving. So now I'd like to give you guys a few quiz of my presentation based on what I have presented today. But these quiz are kind of common sense, but I think sometimes we like to ignore it. So for the first question is, which of these sentences is correct? So you guys, can you answer this first question? Oh, okay. Yeah. So B is the correct answer, because the first thing for the copy editor is to check for the spelling. Spelling is the basic of the basics. So Edward is spelling with a V. So B is the answer. So now we talk about something about the formal letter of the editing. So in the formal letter, where do you put your address? It's in the top right-hand corner or bottom right-hand corner. Who guys want to answer can raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, correct. So actually, it is writing a formal letter and editing a formal letter is different from an email. So actually, if you can search some samples from Google, you can easily find out in a formal letter, you should put your address on the top right-hand corner. So actually, so the third question is about capitalize. So, okay. Why do you choose B? Okay, thank you. So when we use some like certain words like names and months, like sometimes like that, we should be capitalized. That is why I give you guys the third question. Also, now it's the fourth question is which of the things is not something a copy editor should do after reading the draft? Yeah, the correct answer is B. So you are right. So actually, we need to tear it up. We don't need to tear it up or start again. So what we need to do is just check for the full stops to make sure each sentence is complete. And also, as I mentioned in the third question, is to check for the capital letters for names and places, and also for months like the March I just mentioned in the third question. So that is all for the first question. And I think that is all for my today's presentation. So again, my presentation is mainly based on the crash course, and also I look up for some external materials to enhance its variety. For example, I look for the textbook layout of editing, and also I go to the Google to search some of the external materials too. But it is mainly based on the crash course. So thank you so much.
Okay, do we have the next presentation?
Should I need to stop?
Can we just pause it, yeah?
Oh, pause it, okay.
Good morning, everyone. My topic is the punctuation, guys. Why is punctuations? According to NonEssential, punctuation marks are the traffic signals of language. They talk up to slow down, notice this, and take detours and stop. Punctuation is a name of the mark we use in writing, such as apostrophes, commas, and break, used in writing to separate sentences and to clarify the meanings. We use punctuations to schedule and organize our words and give them the real meanings to the sentence. So why the punctuation is so important? The punctuation plays a very important role is in giving intended meanings to a language. Use of the wrong mark of punctuation or even wrong placement of punctuation can change the meanings of the sentence and sometimes even convert the sentence to complex nonsense. Correct punctuation ensures that the meanings of the sentence can be read correctly. So there are 13 punctuation we use in our normal writing. The first one is apostrophe. Apostrophe is the sign to show that something is belong to someone or something, or is concerned with them, such as John's book. Then the brackets are the pair of signs to put a wrong word to show actual information. Also, they cannot be transmitted over news word. The third one is colons. Colon is the tag that used in writing and printing to introduce an explanation, for example, quotations. The most frequent use of colon is at the end of a sentence to introduce list, tabulation, text, and so on. Capitalize the first word after a colon only if it is a proper name or a stack of complex sentences. But there were 3 considerations: expense, time, and flexibility. The comment is the mark used in writing to show a short pause or to separate the things in a list. Use comma to separate elements from a series, including nouns, bases, and adjective. When a conjunction can be used as a suffix sentence. In most cases, the comma is used before the contraction. Use the comma to introduce a complex quotation in a paragraph, but do not use comma at the beginning of an indirect and partial reference. Then the dash is the line used in writing to separate two closely related parts of sentence. Use dash to denote a abrupt change in a sentence or an imperative clause. When a phrase that otherwise would be set off by commas can change a series of words, they must be separated by commas. Use dash to set off the full phrases. Use a dash before an author or composer name at the end of a quotation, and dash should be used to introduce individual sections of a list. The alphabet is the sign used in writing to show that some words have deliberately been left out of a sentence. Use an alphabet to indicate the election of one or more words to condensing quoted text and documents. Be especially careful to avoid deletion that would destroy the meaning. The exclamation point is the sign which is used in writing to show that a word, phrase, or sentence is exclamation. Use the mark to express a high degree of surprise, incredulity, or other strong emotions. The heavens is a short writing or printing like the joining words. Use them to avoid ambiguity or to form a single idea from two or more words. Use it whenever ambiguity would result if it were omitted to avoid ambiguity. Use in compound proper name and adjective. The parentheses are a pair of current marks that you put around word or a number to indicate that you are additional, surprise, or less important. In journal, use it around logos, actual in tagline intro, but otherwise be supreme with it. The period is a mark used in writing to show the end of the sentence or an oration. The period always appears at the end of the declarative sentence to show the finishing. Other ways to use it is abbreviation, initials, and enumeration. The utensil mark is the mark that used at the end of a question. It always appears at the end of a direct question. And the quotation marks are a pair of marks that are used in writing to show that you are recording that someone has said. The basic use of quotation mark is for quotations. Also put quotation marks around a word used in an initial sense. The semicolon is the punctuation mark used to separate different parts of a sentence or list. In journals, use it to indicate a greater separation of source and information, and use it to separate elements from a series when the item is long. When we pass to question, the first one is use one mark of punctuation or even one placement of mark of punctuation can change the meaning of the sentence, and sometimes even convert a sentence to complete nonsense. And the third one is which marks are the pair of marks and used in writing to show that you are recording what someone has said.
Quotation marks.
I don't want to take a lot of time to do this, but I wanted to go maybe over just a few of the entries in the AP style book so you have a better idea of what you'll find in it. I have under week 5 of your syllabus some of the topics that I think are worthwhile for you to look through. And I'm just going to kind of start at the top here and maybe jump down a little bit further, but it's done, as I've mentioned before, in alphabetical order. And that's not always just, even though it's in alphabetic order, you think that's easy to find stuff, but not necessarily, because you have to know what to find. And you don't know for sure what listings they might have in there and how they might, where they might put certain information. So it's not always easy to find what you want to find in the AP style book. The electronic version that probably most professional newspapers now have is easier because you can do a word search or whatever and find it easier that way. And so without that, those of us who, we refer to the AP style book as the Bible of journalism in America. In other words, that thou shalt not violate these commandments. Some of the rules, for example, I would have preferred if in our last presentation, if maybe we'd gone a little bit more into the different rules that AP has specifically, not the generic punctuation rules, because again, AP has their own set of rules that control when to use commas and when to use brackets or parentheses and so forth. You kind of have to have an idea of what to look for, like I said, before you can really find anything. So while it's in alphabetic order, you kind of, oops, I see I'm not projecting. It's good for you to spend some time in the book so you know where to look. For example, if you have a question about abbreviations or acronyms, this is a fairly thorough explanation of when to use how to abbreviate and so forth. Like here's abbreviations for doctor and governor and lieutenant governor and so forth. We in American journalism, we always use a period after abbreviations. I notice that some societies do not put a period after doctor, for example, but I guess for our purposes in my class, go ahead and use American rules, and that it would be in accordance with AP, which is put in the periods after an abbreviation. Looking down, you can see that they also talk about abbreviations for dates. They talk about abbreviation for months. In addresses, they give some, although they have separate listings as well. It tells you about the separate listings, but it gives you some hint as to how to abbreviate parts of addresses that I've talked about before. That when it has a specific address, that you can abbreviate avenue, drive, street, that sort of word. Without the specific address, you do not. That was states. I also reviewed that with you, that in states we are using the traditional abbreviation. Again, they have a separate listing for states. So if you don't find it under abbreviations, it'll tell you where you can find it. Talk some about some of these organizations I mentioned before, where CIA, FBI, GOP are so common that you don't have to spell them out. In fact, they're more common than the spelled out version. Therefore, the spelled out version or the written out version wouldn't make as much sense as the abbreviations do. Jumping ahead. Maybe to capitalizations. I didn't put page numbers in this, so I'm just go fairly quickly to the C's here. You see, they have lots of stuff, like what's the difference between a boat and a ship? This would be good for you to look at regardless, a boat and a ship. Or block and block. There's two spellings for block, and they have different meanings. They're pronounced the same, so they're homonyms, but they don't mean the same. So a bloc is like a group of people. So we talked about the Soviet bloc during the Soviet Union days, and related to all of the communist countries that allied themselves with the Soviet Union. Whereas block meaning like a block in the street, or a block in sports, whatever. There's different ways of using the other kind of block. Blonde, there's two ways of spelling blonde. You may not have known that. There's blonde for a male, and there's a different spelling for blonde for a woman. So lots of stuff in here that you may not have ever been exposed to, and that even American or even those that are native English speakers may not know. So it's something that that is worthwhile going through, especially if you are in a position where you're going to be using AP style, obviously. Then you might want to spend a week just pouring through it to understand what is there. So here it explains, boat is a watercraft of any size, but generally is used to indicate a small craft. Ship is a large seagoing vessel. Again, you may or may not be aware of the difference. The difference in there's a lot of words that are spelled differently depending whether you're using them as a verb or a noun or an adjective. So if you talk about blasting off as a verb, then it's 2 words. But if you talk about the blast off, then it's 1 word. So those sorts of things may come in handy to review and to understand. There's lots of little tidbits in here that that probably would enhance your English if you went through this. Capital and capital, by the way, 2 different things. Capital city is spelled with an AL, but capital referring to the building is spelled with OL. You may not have known that, but that's again just one of those things that especially if you were in journalism in a Western country or something, you would be expected to know to avoid those sorts of mistakes. Let me go to a different one here. Let me go to essential clauses and non-essential clauses. Going down, finding the E down here. So I've referred to them when I've talked to you. So it's in here under essential clauses, non-essential clauses. These terms are used in this book instead of restrictive clause and non-restrictive clause. So you may have been taught it with a different name. To me, it is clearer to call them essential clauses and non-essential because in essence, what you're saying is that you could delete this clause and you would still have a complete sentence. So it's not essential if you can, it's non-essential if you can delete it. If you can't delete it, then it's essential. Both types of clauses provide additional information about a word or phrase in the sentence. So difference between them is that the essential clause cannot be eliminated without changing the meaning of the sentence. It so restricts the meaning of the word or phrase that its absence would lead to a substantially different interpretation of what the author meant. So maybe it doesn't destroy the, how do I say this? Okay, well, anyway, like a non-essential, like I said, doesn't change the meaning. So non-essential clause, however, can be eliminated without altering the basic meaning of the sentence. It does not restrict the meaning so significantly that its absence would radically alter the author's thought. Punctuation, an essential clause must not be set off from the rest of the sentence by commas. A non-essential clause must be set off by commas. So they have some examples. Reporters who do not read the style book should not criticize their editors. Okay, so they're saying here that this is an essential clause. You would obviously, if you took out who do not read the style book, it would have a totally different meaning for that sentence. And so it's not set off by commas. Obviously to take out that clause, who do not read the style book, would, as I said, totally change the sentence. It would be almost not understandable. Down here then, the non-essential reporters who do not read the style book, set off by commas, should not criticize their editors. So now this is parenthetical information. What I refer to as parenthetical information is non-essential. So they're just mentioning that most reporters don't read the AP style book. And so it can be deleted because it doesn't change what this sentence is attempting to say, which is reporters should not criticize their editors. So taking that out, if that's what you mean to say, that's what the writer means to say, then that clause that's set off by commas can be eliminated, and it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence because it was non-essential. It was not the point. So it wasn't defining which reporters you were talking about. They're saying all reporters do not read the style book, and all reporters should not criticize their editors. So that clause was non-essential. Non-essential phrases are very similar, and let's see here. Okay, so right after non-essential clauses are essential and non-essential phrases. These terms are used in this book instead of non-restrictive or restrictive. The underlying concept is the one that also applies to clauses. An essential clause or essential phrase is a word or group of words critical to the reader's understanding of what the author had in mind. Non-essential provides more information. Although the information may be helpful, it's not essential. So the example here is we saw the award-winning movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's no comma around the award-winning or something like that. I guess it's talking, let's see, what would be the phrase here? It could be award-winning as a compound adjective. I guess you could say that actually the phrase could be the entire, could be the award-winning movie. In other words, that you could simplify the sentence to, we saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In this sense, anyway, as it says, no comma, because many movies have won awards, and without the name of the movie, the reader would not know which movie was meant. So they're basically saying this is more essential. Another example, they ate dinner with their daughter, Julie. Because they have more than one daughter, the inclusion of Julie's name is critical if the reader is to know which daughter is meant. So those are both essential clauses, that the information was not set up with commas, and it's essential to understanding what the writer intends to say. Whereas the non-essential examples are, we saw the 1975 winner in the Academy Award competition for Best Picture, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So in this case, only one movie won the award. So there's no question as to, if you wanted to look it up in Google, you could find out which it was. So the name is informative, but even without the name, no other movie could be meant. So there's, in this case, they set it off with commas. They put a comma after picture, and that becomes non-essential. It's helpful, but non-essential. Another example then, they ate dinner with their daughter Julie and her husband, David. Julie has only one husband. So the phrase, if the phrase read and her husband David, it would suggest that she had more than one husband. So anyway, I'm not going any further than that. I want to give you guys some time to look at each other's stories and to work on the final version of your stories that you'll hand in next Monday. But it's important to understand that there's a lot of valuable stuff in the AP Style book. Once you to fine-tune your English language, it would be valuable to you. And it's essential for a journalist in writing in an English environment to understand these rules, because it makes a huge difference whether you understand these or not. And so that's why it's called the Bible of journalism in America, because we, even for those of us who speak English as natively, we don't understand all these rules. Here's another one that a lot of people who are native English speakers don't understand. Every day and every day. Pronounced the same, but they're two different words. So we go to school every day. That would be two different words, two separate words. but she wears everyday shoes means, in essence, shoes that aren't really important, not fancy. So it might be flip-flops. Some of you wear flip-flops or sandals or whatever. Those would be your everyday shoes. And so you have two words that are, I mean, they're spelled the same except for the space, but they mean something totally different. One is an adverb and one is an adjective. Everyone and everyone. Everyone with a space in between, and everyone is one word. Two different words. They're two, as two different words. Every one of the clues was worthless. So that's separated then. But everyone wants his life to be happy. It's unified, one word. So even some of the stuff that you think you understand, you may not understand. And that's where the AP Stylebook could be helpful to you in learning better English. But as journalists, that's essential for all of us. If we're working in an environment where AP Stylebook is our Bible, so to speak. We have to understand what's in there and refer to it, otherwise we're going to be getting in trouble all the time with our bosses. So, okay, so I'll stop that here.